Think about it. Do realistic worlds in video games offer greater challenge and reward than exaggerated ones? Hi, I'm Dylan, and last week we talked about creating realistic characters in video games. If you didn't see that video, click right here, and this week we're going to talk about creating realistic worlds in video games. In Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, he writes that an elite group of expert violinists by the age of 20 had each logged around 10,000 hours of practice. That to become a grand chess master takes 10 years or roughly 10,000 hours of practice. Neurologist Daniel Levitin writes that it takes around 10,000 hours of practice to achieve mastery in any one subject. This is commonly referred to as the 10,000 hour rule. And why am I telling you? Call of Duty. Call of Duty has been around for 11 years. That's 1 year longer than it takes to achieve mastery in something. But if you played Call of Duty, you know that's not true. If you look at sales for Call of Duty games, the first 3 sold in the low millions, but it wasn't until 2007's Modern Warfare that they saw a spike in popularity, their sales jumping to 12 million. And the sequel in 2009 saw that number almost double. That was 5 years ago, and if you're following the logic of Malcolm Gladwell, that means that most Call of Duty players should only be around halfway to becoming masters at the game. Yet, within a month or two of playing the original Modern Warfare, people had already perfected it. The real-life equivalent of video game actions are always harder than their in-game representations. 360 no-scope, stabbing people from a ledge, parkour, even running, way easier in video games. There are of course exceptions. Games like QWOP are designed to make a simple task very, very difficult. I love it, it's the best game. But most games simplify actions in order to make them more entertaining. Actually sprinting for miles on end isn't actually fun. Either is doing so while holding a gun in your field of view the entire time. I mean, seriously, how do their arms not fall asleep or off? And often the more real games get with the mundane things, the less fun it can be. For example, picking locks in Fallout feels a lot more like picking locks in real life than hacking in Watch Dogs does feel like hacking in real life. Granted, I've never hacked anything, but I assume it's more than pressing X. In the past 2 years, there has been a big surge in popularity in realistic, air quotes, indie games. Games like DayZ and Rust implement permadeath, the concept that when you die, you lose everything you have, permanently. And people love it. It allows for a completely different type of gameplay and challenge. You're really going to think about whether or not you want that airdrop, because if you run in, you could die and lose everything. If you're me, you only have a rock, so it's not a big deal, but it's kind of inconvenient. But we're still not where we could be. Let's talk about The Last of Us some more, and really any post-apocalyptic game in general. Can you tell that I like The Last of Us? Can you? In The Last of Us, you can craft different items with materials you pick up from around the world. But there's only a finite amount of different materials, and they're all the same everywhere. I mean, why does everybody have broken scissors? I don't even have regular scissors. That's not true, I totally have scissors. Damn it, there goes my argument. I remember a time in the game when I needed a bottle to throw as a distraction, so I go to pick one up and I find out that it's actually a bottle that I'm not allowed to interact with. When Ubisoft was making the original Assassin's Creed game, they decided that if a ledge stuck out more than an inch, you could grab it. The same logic should be applied to the world. If you can see it, you can interact with it. I want to be able to pull weeds out of the ground, or look at someone's books on their bookshelf, or sit on someone's couch and rifle through their magazines. I'm looking at stuff around my apartment. This is especially applicable in post-apocalyptic games, like The Last of Us. There are so many resources you could use for different things, like crafting weapons, or clothes, or food, but we're limited to a finite amount of interactables. The Last of Us is an incredibly character and story-driven game, and often the gameplay detracts from that. It frequently puts you in essentially horde-type mission modes in which you have to kill dozens of dudes just to get through it. This is especially jarring when you're playing as Ellie. Instead of making a super-powered character in a world where it doesn't fit, why not make a character that makes you feel vulnerable? You should have a very limited amount of abilities and weapons, like you would in real life, and you should be presented with more realistic situations. Instead of having Ellie face a horde of 20 guys, have her kill 2 guys, but make it very difficult. I mean, killing's gotta be hard, and killing hundreds of people? Impossible, right? To be fair, there are people, usually soldiers or serial killers, who have killed a comparable amount of people to Joel and Ellie, and any other video game character. Simo Hayha, sorry for that pronunciation, was a Finnish sniper who killed 705 people during World War II. Again, during World War II, Jack Churchill captured 42 Germans using nothing but a sword and a longbow. And Colombian serial killing rapist Luis Garavito, again with the pronunciation, confessed to killing 140 children and is suspected of killing over 400 children. But these are exceptional cases, and I'd be very hard-pressed to say that every single character in every video game ever, including the multiple Call of Duty avatars you have, are exceptional cases. But back to The Last of Us. You can even listen in on the conversations the bad guys have with themselves, talking about some guy, you, who's killed dozens of their friends. In such a real world, I find it incredibly hard to believe that one guy, our protagonist and hero, is on par for kills with one of the most prolific serial killers of all time. In games like Shadow of Mordor, however, it totally makes sense. Not only do you have superpowers in a world that makes sense to have said powers, but your death and respawn is actually incorporated into the story. Orcs will comment about how they've killed you before and that you've cheated death, and they'll even call you a ghost. But in a game where your character's central inner conflict comes from the fact that his daughter was killed, I find it kind of hard to believe that he'd go around killing hundreds of potential other parents. The Last of Us assumes that you've killed hundreds of people without dying. Shadow of Mordor assumes that you've died, as you would and do. Even little things in games like driving can break realism and pull you out of the narrative. In Watch Dogs, a lot of the story is told via phone call, and I can be in my car on the phone swearing revenge for the death of my niece, all the while running people over on the sidewalk. And don't say, but Dylan, why don't you just drive better? No. If I see a route that's even slightly faster or way more fun looking, I'm gonna take it. And if that route happens to be through a crowd of people, so be it. If AAA games took notes from the indie scene, we'd see a severed connection to how games used to be, and we'd see an entire new genre surface. Instead of feeling unstoppable, we'd feel vulnerable, and we connect even more with the game and its characters. I'm not saying that all games should do this, far from it, but games where dying is heartbeats away should make you feel those feels. Because there's nothing worse than losing the Kestrel to a frickin' engine fire. That game keeps me up at night. And even games that make you feel like a superhero, like Assassin's Creed, should allow you to interact with the world in a deep, meaningful, and responsive way that we're currently unable to. We figured out how to make big, beautiful, expansive open world games, but it's time we go further than skin deep. What do you guys think? Would more complex and intricate worlds create more interesting challenges? Let me know in the comments, and if you haven't already, be sure to click right on my face to subscribe, or at least think about it. Let's see what you guys had to say about realism in video game characters. FishBananas1 comments that actors in Hollywood are trying to differentiate their looks from each other so they don't look the same on camera in the same way that gimmicky characters in video games are trying to look different. Which would be awesome if we could get the video game characters to look as similar as the actors and have a problem of them looking too similar from afar. That would be really awesome. I can deal with wide shots in which characters look the same, like that guy from the Hobbit movie that looks exactly like Legolas / Orlando Bloom. He looks like Orlando Bloom in Pirates of the Caribbean. You know who I'm talking about. If we could get to that stage, I'd be really happy. Insanely Ludicrous 1 comments saying that games like Beyond Two Souls have really good story and really good graphics, but there isn't really any gameplay. I don't know that that's necessarily a problem, nor would I call Beyond Two Souls great storytelling, but that's a whole different thing. I think games like The Walking Dead is a really good example of that. That doesn't have great graphics particularly, or any gameplay, but it's an amazing story. I think my biggest thing is if developers would buckle down and do one thing really well, or do everything really well. But most people, I think, can only focus on one thing. Games like Titanfall are a really good example because they buckled down and only did multiplayer because they knew no one really cared about the single player. Also, it's FishBananas, not FishBanana1s. I was reading FishBananas one day ago, like the comment thing. Sorry. RuneWalker1 disagrees with me about the whole costumes just being ridiculous and says that each element of their costume and like tattoos and stuff actually contributes to their character, which I read your comment and it's totally true, that does build their character, but I'd much rather get their character developed by them talking and emoting rather than me looking at them and being like, oh yeah, he's a welder, I get it. GoVerbanoun comments saying that Minecraft is one of the most beautiful games because the vast landscapes can look incredibly beautiful, which I totally agree with you on, It's kind of like, can often be like a Monet painting in the sense that up close it looks like garbage, but from afar, it can totally be beautiful. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the comments.